JFK The JAB You. And inadvertently, I guess, in the process of trying to cure something, they figured out a way to produce cancer on accident. And the rush to figure that out led to a series of events that you are familiar with, but I don't think you're familiar with it from this point of view. Enjoy.
Castro's revolution starts. New Orleans is dependent on Cuba and Latin America for their trade. This was very, very important to New Orleans. They needed this place to stay like it was. They didn't need a communist to take over Cuba. Then the Cuban Missile Crisis happened. So then they put nuclear missiles just off the shore of Cuba. Now they could launch a nuclear attack and attack almost anywhere in the southeastern part of the United States, especially New Orleans. Now comes the dark side. That was the good side. This isn't the dark side. That's the good side. Now the dark side's next. They wanted to assemble, how many people saw the movie JFK with Oliver Stone? There was so much truth in that movie. Joe Pesci played David Ferry. Mary Sherman, now she's in charge of the big lab. They assemble a bioweapon team. A bioweapon team. If you want to prevent World War III, you need to help us develop this weapon because something bad's going to happen. Kennedy's going down or Castro's going down. You pick. That's how they talk these people into doing it. So Mary Sherman was at the big lab running the linear particle accelerator. She's radiating the viruses, trying to come up with something that'll stop what they've already turned loose. Judith Baker, I'll cover her next. She's a 19-year-old girl that did brilliant things and faster than anybody on the planet did. And here comes an interesting name, Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee Harvey Oswald. When you find out what he did, you'll understand they gave this 19-year-old girl, this U.S. Marine, as a bodyguard. He was taking these viruses back and forth between the two labs. David Ferry ran the little lab. Others involved, Carlos Marcello, which everybody knows, Jack Ruby, Guy Bannister, and JFK. This story, JFK was a tiny player in this thing. The story that could have leaked out made this one look like nothing. This is the little laboratory. So if you saw the movie JFK, when Joe Pesci had all those mice that he was injecting. And in the movie, they said, what's the matter with this dude? They said, well, he's working on a cure for cancer. Well, no, they were weaponizing cancer. It was the opposite of what they said. This was the little laboratory in Louisiana. This is where the mice were held. The work was done at the big lab. Harvey is shuffling stuff back and forth between these labs. Judith Baker was a star science student in Florida high school. She wanted to find a cure for cancer because her grandmother just passed away from it. At 19 years old, on some crummy little lab, she was able to give mice cancer faster than anybody in history. She was able to give mice cancer in 7 days. Nobody had been able to do this. What she did was she radiated them and kept putting them in cigarette smoke chambers. Radiation, cigarette smoke. Radiation, cigarette smoke. This got out in the papers. She was visited by big shots. How did you do this at 19 in a high school lab? So in March of 61, Harold Urey, the guy in charge of the Manhattan Project, and Dr. Ochsner went down to visit Judith in Florida. Now, this is the guy that worked with Fermi. We should know what Fermi means because that's our nuclear plant, Fermi. Ochsner promised Judy, if you come with me, I will skip the next 2 years of medical school or in pre-med. We'll put you right in Tulane Medical School. We promised her all this stuff, but you got to help me create these cancer-causing viruses since you did this faster than anybody. 1961 to 63, this woman is at a cancer research training program. They closed her lab down. Young lady, do you know what you're dealing with? This is dangerous. You have no business. They closed the lab, confiscated her papers, and sent her to know how to do this professionally at the Roswell Park Cancer Center in Buffalo, New York. Here she was properly trained how to handle cancer viruses. And she is in all kinds of, this is very easy stuff to look up. This story has been hidden in plain sight in front of you all these years. This is not a secret. May of 1963, shortly after moving to New Orleans, Judith had a chance meeting which she thought at a post office with Lee Harvey Oswald. Lee was already working with Ferry, Sherman, and Alton Ochsner on the bioweapon. Oswald set up a meeting for Judy with Mary Sherman and David Ferry. Joe Pesci played a great part in that movie of that guy. That was just incredible. They discussed the nature of the product and said, look, if you can make a cancer-causing virus to kill Castro, you'll prevent World War III. David Ferry, he was an oddball. The movie explained it well. He was a strong anti-Castro supporter. He was angry at JFK for being soft on Cuba. He wanted Castro or JFK dead. By injecting Castro with cancer, the U.S. government would avoid the usual suspicion that a violent assassination would generate. Lee Harvey Oswald starts a relationship with this little 19-year-old girl. They're working side by side in a laboratory at the small lab, and they're handling the cancer-causing viruses. When you saw the movie, and they showed Lee Harvey Oswald protesting, supporting Castro, they showed the real clips. He was trying to act like he was a supporter of Castro so he could find a way to get in to the country. They showed leaflets, and Ochsner had organized all this so that he could look like a defector. Judith's assignment isn't to work on a vaccine, but to help create a virus capable of causing galloping cancer. Her job consists of harvesting 50 or more mice every week that have been injected with SV40 viruses mutated by exposure to radiation. She grinds up the most aggressive tumors, suspends them in calf serum medium, and centrifuges them to extract the viruses. She takes them to Dr. Sherman's lab to be re-exposed to radiation with the linear particle accelerator. Oswald was taking all this stuff back and forth. You heard about the Riley Coffee Company in the summer of '63. This was their cover story. They punched in at the Riley Coffee Company and left. They didn't want any ties to this laboratory. This episode, The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Love Affair, was shown one time on the History Channel and pulled so fast. You can find it on YouTube, but the government never wanted this shown again, ever. And Judith said what she convinced Ochsner to do was you had to get Castro and start radiating. You got to get this cancer in his body, convince him he's got it, and you keep radiating him, and keep radiating, x-ray him again and again. You got to keep the radiation going. He'll think he's getting a treatment to kill a cancer when actually they're destroying his immune system so the vaccine can take root. She was successful at killing animals and a person in 28 days from the injection, but the stage had to be set. You had to beat the body up with radiation. After successful killing numerous monkeys with the biological weapon, the group, unbeknownst to her, they went to Angola prison and got a prisoner. They took this prisoner to Jackson Mental Hospital and gave him a whole bunch of x-rays And they gave him the injection, and he killed him in 28 days, like they were supposed to. Judith got word that they just used her vaccine to kill a human being. She wrote a letter to Ochsner. Ochsner's secretary, this guy's trying to keep his hands clean because he's the president of the American Cancer Society. He doesn't want anything with his name anywhere near this. She writes a letter. He's got a temporary secretary that day. And the secretary, the temp, reads the letter and hands it to him. He explodes, calls Judith, reneged on his offer. This opened a can of worms that he did not want his fingers in. A few months later, Lee told Judith over the phone that they were going to kill Kennedy. Let's figure it's easier to kill Kennedy than it was to kill Castro. What kind of viruses have we learned to weaponize? We're getting to the autoimmune part next.
Dr. Kano contends that the Dietrich operation was, quote, a modest research and development facility, end quote. In fact, Dietrich's own history recalls it being a large, sophisticated biological warfare testing center. The facility employed some 300 scientists, including 240 microbiologists, 40 of whom had PhDs, 250 specialists in other disciplines ranging from plant pathology to mathematical statistics, and between 700 and 1,000 supporting staff. The operations occupied some 1,230 acres of federally owned land, upon which 450 structures were maintained. It produced annually some 900,000 mice, 50,000 guinea pigs, 2,500 rabbits, and 4,000 monkeys. There was also a large corral area for holding larger animals such as horses, cattle, and sheep. The cost of running Dietrich's biological weapons research alone was reported at $21.9 million in 1969. And here's another fact. By the falsely alleged end of Fort Detrick's biological weapons program in 1969, there were not simply 7 germs that America had weaponized. Conservatively, there were thousands when you include the bioterrorizing cancer viruses and other germs being cloned, mutated, and mass-produced for global distribution in support of the drug cartel's burgeoning cancer industry. This developing cancer industry really got a shot in the arm back in the 1950s when the first polio vaccines produced in contaminated monkey kidney tissues containing cancer viruses were being tested and injected in millions of people worldwide. The cancer virus was later identified as SV40. It was determined to cause cancer in nearly every species it was injected. After scientists and informed industrialists realized these vaccines were going to produce epidemics of cancer, cartel officials within the National Cancer Institute started a special virus cancer program, the SVCP, in 1962, according to secretive documents. Here is simply a partial list of the deadly viruses they created in labs by 1971. These included leukemia viruses, lymphoma viruses, sarcoma viruses, encephalitis agents, genital herpes, Hodgkin's disease, influenza, infectious mononucleosis, Kuru, that is the mad cow disease prion, breast tumor viruses, and much more.
How many people know people that have had these cancers? On July 21st, 1964, Mary Sherman's lab was sabotaged. They connected the power lead on the linear particle accelerator straight to the switch. She grabbed the switch, it cauterized and vaporized the right side of her body. And the paper said she was murdered in an apartment. Well, they picked her up, put her in her apartment, tried to make it look like some weird sex crime, which it wasn't. And this was how they started to dismantle this operation.
Wow, the covert weaponization of this stuff, guys. I'll be waiting your comments. Have a good night.